all the games I used to play in my younger, wilder days. The game of clubs and tees, it never crossed my mind.
Welcome into another episode of the Turn Fantasy Golf Podcast. I'm Andrew Putters, and today got to fill in for Joe. I got Spencer Aguiar, also from Rotoballer.com, the guy that heads up the Vegas report out there, who's on a steamer this year through 2 weeks. Spencer, what do you got going on at Rotoballer, and tell us what's happened this year so far.
Well, Andrew, thank you for having me on. It's always a pleasure to do this show with you, but there's a ton of exciting things going on at Rotoballer in 2022, including a few big announcements that we're going to have throughout the entire season. One of them might take place this week, so keep a listen out for that. But, Joe and I have both gotten off the hot starts. He had a big few DFS scores already. You can find his Core 4 article along with any of the additional content he pens on the premium part of the site. You can also get my in-tournament DFS model when you sign up. I'm off to a 9-2-2 start on my head-to-heads there. The code is TOFF. That gets you 10% off your order, but I'm proud of everything that we produce. The free part of Rotoballer is top-notch. We have our one-and-done contest amongst the team that I post every week. Joe covers FanDuel. I do Draftkings. There are countless other articles I'm missing on both of our parts of the website, but I'm pumped for this news to come out. I think that it's going to be a big year for Rotoballer, and I just look forward to us, continuing to take it to the next level.
Absolutely. Yeah. Man, you two are quite the duo. You're right. Joe, he wanted me to throw out there last week, well, first of all, let's just talk about last week.
Okay.
Sony Open. It's one of my favorite tournaments of the year because of the golf course in particular, but Russell Henley, 4-5 shot lead, 5-6 shot lead going to the back nine. I feel like I talked to Joe this morning. I feel like this is about the third time in a row we've seen this. He's had a somewhat of a commanding lead. I won't say commanding. He's been in control of the golf tournament on Saturday and Sunday, and just basically goes into full-blown conservative mode, and people chase him down. Hats off to Hideki on that back nine he played, and especially that shot on the playoff hole to take him out, take Russell Henley out. But what were your first of all, what's your thoughts on Henley? I've got some thoughts on him. I want to also share about rostering him in DFS. But what's your thoughts on this? Are we seeing a trend here? I definitely think with Hideki, the caveat is when you gain 6 to 7 shots on the field putting, have the best putting week of your entire life. The way he hits the ball, he's going to win whenever he tees it up if he puts like that.
Yeah, let me start it with Hideki since you just left us off on that. But I said it on my Better Golf podcast last Tuesday. Hideki's arguably the best ball striker I've ever seen. All it takes is a spike putting week for him to compete. And we got that in spades with him gaining a tournament best 7.264 with his flat stick. I don't know what there is to say about Russell Henley at this point, because you're correct. We've seen this happen multiple times now. He looked great through his first 9 holes, got himself out in front, but he did what he's been doing every single Sunday where everything seems to fall apart when it matters the most. He played his back 9 and 1 over. There's obviously some bad luck involved with Hideki being able to run him down, but you have to do what Cameron Smith did the week before and keep the foot on the pedal and not allow someone to surge up the leaderboard on you. I know he has 3 PGA Tour wins. You can never expect to lose when you start the day 2 up and fire a 65, but there's still something to be said about the mano-a-mano approach where Hideki, he gets to see everything he does firsthand. It's not like he looked up on the leaderboard at 17 and realized that things had tightened up on him. He knew where he stood, and he missed multiple makeable putts down the stretch, multiple bad drives, including on the 18th hole when he wasn't able to birdie it. And then Hideki's able to steal the tournament in the playoff with an incredible shot to set him up for eagle there, but really disappointing from Henley. It's, as you said, it's been 2, 3, 4 times in a row that it seems like he's done this well in contention. And as I said, a 65 is usually going to be enough to win, but you have to keep the foot on the pedal.
Yeah, you're right too. I mean, I guess we're saying he kind of gagged it off, but 29 on the front 9? I mean, you're down to cool off somewhat. So yeah, it's hard to totally say he gagged it off, but he definitely went conservative mode. You definitely have to keep your foot on the pedal. Joe wanted me to throw out on that topic that he basically dogged Hideki last week, and I agreed with him that I have a hard time seeing Hideki in this golf course lining up. However, if you think about Russell Henley, he fits the Sony Open's track as far as his game style. And my concern with rostering Russell Henley is just this: the win equity might not be there anymore. And I don't want to just, this isn't based on one tournament. I wasn't necessarily a fan because I feel like he's feast or famine anyway. So he might be GPP only and really in spots only, you know, maybe 3 or 4 times a year. And also his salary's got to be low enough where it makes sense. So yeah, you want to touch on that?
Yeah, I agree with you on that. It's tough with Russell Henley, and that's one of the reasons why, like, if you look at the way he sets up for the Sony Open last week, there's a ton to love about him, and I understand why he was one of the highest owned players on the board. But if we're talking about 25% ownership for a super volatile golfer, I think as a whole, you do run into problems rostering Russell Henley, mostly now that he's, a $9,000 golfer this week in this tournament. So I would just be careful when you move forward with Russell Henley. I think that he's a great ball striker. I think that he's going to have big weeks this season, but there's going to be a problem if he's going to be 15% plus owned and $9,000+ in a lot of these starts, for as volatile as he is, at least.
Right. Yeah, I agree with you on that. Yeah, he's never really been my favorite player to roster anyway. And I feel like on a style of golf course like this, most of the time you can maybe get some people that are like maybe like a Kevin Na or Chris Kirk, probably cheaper than you can get Russell Henley on the average. So I would definitely go with those as long as Kevin Na don't WD. Speaking of Grayson Murray, Kevin Na, little Twitter back and forth, great banter. He went on a podcast, I think yesterday, Kevin Na did, and it was discussed. And what was brought up was he's been asked by people in the media if this is going to be like a Bryson Brooks exchange, and he said the difference is those two guys are on the PGA Tour and Grayson Murray is not. So I thought that was pretty funny. Anything else you want to mention about the Sony Open before we move on?
Yeah, I guess there would just be 2 things I wanted to bring up. I had an outright on Corey Connors. It's the same thing with him that you hope with Hideki, that the putter heats up. Didn't the first 3 days. And then the second thing would be, I'd like to hear your thoughts on Seamus Power. He continues to look really good. My model picked up on this 18 months ago that he might be in store for a huge move late in his career. And we're seeing it every single week with him finding success. So what are your thoughts on Seamus moving forward?
I haven't actually watched him play much other than just keeping up with the stat line. So, and I kind of like to see the golfer play, a little bit, but I mean, the stats are there. I mean, hits it a long ways, hits it good, makes a ton of birdies. I mean, you look at it, he's finished in the top 15 4 of the last 5 times. My concern with that was if you take those 4 of the last 5 out, he's the only like 2 out of the last, 8 cuts made. So there could be some volatility there at times. But I mean, hey, goes far back as the whole fall swing he played. He had a great year. So, you and Joe that are deeper into this life than I am. Pick guys out you like. I'm just now kind of getting on the Taylor Gooch bandwagon just now, and about 4 months into the Corey Connors bandwagon. Even though those guys have yet to hit that next level, I feel, but I mean, they're right there, and you guys might be onto something with this Power guy. My only concern would be the consistency side. I think we see a lot more consistency out of even this week. I'm sure we'll talk about it. Corey, he's surrounded by Gooch and Connors, and far consistency wise, I would definitely go with them over him. But I'm definitely not usually on the front end of seeing somebody break through. How's that? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that's a fair answer with that. Like, I'm always trying to find people before they can break out. And I was lucky enough to hit Corey Connors at 250 to 1 before he's, got to the level that he is right now with it. And now we see him as a $9,000 golfer and a guy who is a legitimate top 25 player in the world. But kind of saw the same thing with Seamus Power there for a while. And I was fortunate enough to hit an outright on him last year. So it paid off with it. But yeah, I think you have a lot of guys that it's a flash in the pan with them. I don't think that's the case with Seamus. The only concern I would have with him is that he is a 34-year-old golfer that's doing this so late in his career. But I think the one positive note to that is he's a guy who clearly from a statistical perspective should have been doing this. Now he's a winner on tour. So some of that ease of just knowing that he's going to be able to play every single tournament and there's not the stress of having to make, the cut to have to provide for himself with it. I think that he's in a different head space than he was a couple years ago with it. So I like Seamus a lot. I think Seamus fits pretty well for the course this week. We'll get into it a little bit with it, but I think Seamus is a very good golfer.
Yeah. Like I said, I'm usually behind you guys on the forefront of finding somebody new. So, yeah, I think so too. And you go off course, you're gonna make a lot of birdies. I definitely like a player with his skill set.
I would agree.
Let's see here. Moving through here, we got the American Express this week. American Express. I guess that's just all it's called, the American Express. Formerly known as the Desert Classic, Bob Hope Classic, Palm Springs Classic, the Career Builder Challenge. Probably what most well known for the Bob Hope Chrysler or Bob Hope Desert Classic for years and years and years. They play the La Quinta Country Club, which is PJ West, Stadium Course, Nicklaus Course. I'm not a huge fan of this tournament. Main reason it's not pro-ams don't really get me. It's anything that deviates from the normal 72 hole standard golf tournament. It's just usually doesn't bid well for me long term. So if it's a no cut event or a 54 hole cut event, which this one is this week, 54 holes, I'm not a huge fan. And I mean, I'm not huge on seeing 30 under, 25 under, 22 under win anyway. So, if we can find tournaments that are 8 to 14 under, that's my wheelhouse, as far as golf tournaments I like to watch. But you're going to see a lot of great golf shots, really, really beautiful golf courses out there. There's nothing really special about any of these, in my opinion. They range anywhere from 7,000 to 7,300 yards. Like I said, most of your winners, 20 to 25 under you'll see. And really, the winners are really all over the place. People that will be in the field this week. If you look like a Brian Gay has won this and a John Rahm's won this, Jason Duffner's won it, Siwoo Kim's won it, Adam Long's won it, Patrick Reed. So it's really, it's just a race to get to 25, 30 under. So saying that, you got anything you want to talk about the golf course before we get in the slate, Spencer?
Well, I think everything that you're mentioning is the reason why I don't like this tournament. I don't think that there's great rollover predictability with the stats. I don't think that there's great rollover predictability with the course history. And you don't have to look any further. Like anytime that you're going to have 3 courses on the slate for it, like these split rotational tournaments are tough. You're required to take a stance with how in depth you want to go for your research. But I think most people would expect me to say that breaking down each course individually and then adding them all back together would be my preferred decision. But I'm actually on the opposite end of the spectrum here. I think there are enough similarities between all 3 that we should be able to decipher and glean the data to form a singular opinion. All 3 are inside the bottom 15 in length. So they're short. They also grade inside the bottom 15 for difficulty. So they're easy. There are going to be 4 par 5s on each where you're going to need to score because the winning total has averaged just above 24 under over the past 10 years. But with all that being said, I do like taking the PGA West Stadium course and adding in a few additional measurements there. Not only do 50% of the rounds take place on that course, but we get the most important Sunday finish. So when we're looking at that, just to touch a little bit on what you were just talking about 7,200 yards, par 72. It seems like the Bermuda grass is dormant on all the venues this week. We're going to get an overseeded POA texture instead. It's something to keep in mind and at least confirm as we get closer to the start of the event. In theory, the stadium court's the most challenging of the 3, although none of them present that hard of a test. I wouldn't add anything wild to the fray based on that. 9 of the holes have water that come into play. There is extensive bunkering throughout that makes it vital to either hit the fairway or clear the sand traps with distance. And we usually see this tournament won or lost at the 4 par 3s and 4 par 5s. 3 of the par 3s are within your 5 most difficult holes. The par 5s aren't a given that you make birdie, which actually increases the importance that you do score on them when you get your chances. But it isn't to say that they're hard. They're still going to be your 4 easiest setups. And then just as a couple other things to throw out there, I like a weighted driving category because playing out of the fairways consistently yields one of the highest birdie or better totals we see all year. The accuracy gives you the better proximity numbers. The distance clears the hazards that might present an issue. And then a combination of iron play and putting will be extremely critical. 24.7% of second shots occur from 150 to 175 yards. That is 4.4% above average. We also get a 6.2% increase from 125 yards and within.
Yeah, I like the distance in the fairway. I definitely think people say that putting is most important, proximity is most important, but whenever you want to go low, let's be honest, you got to hit the driver pretty good, get it out there, get you in play a lot, and that's why starting right out of the gate, I'm gonna put two guys together at the top. Normally, I kind of break this down in pricing, but I'm gonna kind of put it together. I think Rahm and Cantlay really are beyond better than anybody in this field, in the slate, and in a golf course where you're going to have to shoot, 4 really low rounds. I like Rahm over Cantlay, to be honest with you. I just like Rahm over Cantlay in general. I think that it's fair to be a $400 price difference. I think we've seen a lot more consistency of John Rahm year in, year out since they've both been on tour. But Cantlay has been hot with the putter back in the fall. So thoughts on those two guys, if and any, you like either one of them?
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, they're the two most likely people when it comes to win equity for this tournament. They're number 1 and 2 on my model. And really, when we look at this tournament in general, everybody over $8,000 is top 30 in my model. So it just goes to show how good pricing is this week. But as much as I like Cantlay, it's hard to justify playing him over Rahm when they're currently around a 2% difference of one another in ownership. Add to that Rahm is only $400 more expensive. I just think he makes more logical sense if starting at the top. But pricing is kind of a disaster for all the reasons I just mentioned. Like, we're going to have to figure out a way to leverage ownership with it. We don't have a large enough discrepancy on most of these plays outside of Rahm and Cantlay to where, a guy should be 20% and then somebody else should be 2. I think that's where we can get some of our difference and some of our advantage here. But Rahm's the one outlier to that notion. I do think Scheffler and Finau make some sense. You get more of a contrarian route if you take them. I've messed around with this board quite a little bit. I tried to stack Rahm and Cantlay together. It left you with $6,950. I didn't like how roster construction looked that way. I played around with it a little bit with Rahm and Finau to see. I think that that's in play potentially, but you're going to have to figure out what you want to do on this board and kind of move from there, because it is such a difficult tournament just with there being 3 courses that it's playing on. And you're going to hear that answer from me a lot, unfortunately, because I don't like this tournament from a betting or a DFS perspective. But if you made me rank them, it would probably be Rahm first, Scheffler second, Finau third, and then Cantlay fourth, just because of the ownership and how close he is and how easily you can get to Rahm with it.
Yeah, I think so. I would get on board more with the Scheffler than the Finau or the Cantlay, just to be honest with you. Not necessarily thinking that he can go out and win this tournament. I mean, obviously he could, but I definitely could see, sneaking into top 5 or something like that. His style of game is perfect for this course. If you look on behind them, I want to put in, if you go from Sungjae M, Taylor Gooch, Seamus Power, Corey Connors, I like to group those together too. Very similar, not similar player. They don't really have similar games, but I feel like the pricing is very tight here with this talent level. And like I said, I really don't like any of these 4 for that reason. I would like to skip down one more player. I think Matt Wolff is going to get grossly overlooked this week and makes a ton of sense at 9,300 right below them.
Yeah, Wolff, I mean, from a contrarian ownership perspective, I think that makes some sense. And maybe you could make the same argument for Will Zalatoris. His game hasn't been in the right spot with it. But I agree with what you just said. I'm kind of leaning towards a full fade of the 9,000s. I think Answer and Gooch were the 2 that I was the most intrigued to see where their ownership would land. But the plays are all stacking in the same areas. Once again, let's see where the ownership falls as of Wednesday night. But I don't think there's a massive difference between most of those golfers that we're talking about in the 9,000s and a lot of the guys beneath them in the 8,000s. I'd much prefer to look at some of those players at sub 10% totals. I think it just creates a better GPP mindset when you go about it that way.
Yeah, I agree. It's almost like to me that maybe the 9,000 might be a fade just because it's going to be so hard to differentiate between the talent level all the way through. You touched on Zalatoris a little bit. I'm ready. I'm ready to get back in on him whenever we're playing a tough golf course. He's going to make a lot of sense in a lot of majors year in, year out, and looking forward to watching him play. It's just hard for me to think that he can shoot 25 under over a 4-day period. He's going to have one day where he just total bombs the putter, and that's going to hurt him. Moving down past the 9,000 though, several in the 8K range, several former winners: Patrick Reed, Siwoo Kim, Johnny Vegas. Are we going to dip into we got to play the Charles Howell III on the West Coast string here at $8,000. I feel like his pricing is probably about $1,000 more than it should be, but I mean, the guy's almost a guaranteed top 30, right?
Yeah, my model likes him. I have him as a value in all iterations of how I ran my model. He's 10th overall for me this week. We're looking at less than 5% ownership. I have absolutely no problems with him. I think Justin Rose is in play at 8,600. He ranks 8th in my model on easy courses under 7,200 yards and 4th on Pete Dye properties over his past 50 rounds. Ricky Fowler has 2 top 21s here over his past 2 starts. He also ranks 13th when it comes to total driving. These are like the projected to be sub 7% golfers right now that I just think make more sense than the $9,000 players that we were talking about. Like, there's not a huge difference between them, but if you can give me half the ownership or even more than that in some of these cases, I think these guys have just as much win upside as the Gooches and the Connors of the world. Alex Noren at 8,400 is the best pivot we have discussed on the board so far. If he stays between 3 to 5%, good course history, great on easy courses, top 10 in this field for my weighted par 3 category. Siwoo Kim is the defending champion at 8,300. There's always going to be volatility with him, but 5% ownership can pay off nicely for a golfer that consistently ranks inside the top 10 on tour when playing Pete Dye courses. He's going to get that at the stadium course. And I am intrigued by Jonathan Vegas. He's looking like he's going to be around 15%, but that feels like it's well within a fair number for a player that does rank 11th overall for me on my board. So as you can tell, like, not a ton I liked in the $9,000 range, but what is that? That's 3, 4, 5, about 5 or 6 players in the $8,000 range that I think you could fit into a lineup.
Yeah, I agree with that. I agree with that take. One name that we also want to hit on for sure before we start getting this dropping further. We skipped right over the guy that melted down last week on the back nine, or we say melted down. Russell Henley at 9,000. Missed the cut here for the last 5 years. He's on a full blown fade this week. If you can find anybody against him.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think he's a good matchup fade potentially. And 22nd in my model, so he's 10 spots overpriced. He's currently 14 to 15% owned. That's the 7th highest owned player on the board. I think that will come down because I think the narrative will kind of start fitting what you said with it. If he's been terrible here, he blew up last week. I think people will find their way off of him, but you never know. When you look at his current form, 2nd, 22nd, 7th over his last 3 starts, people might overplay him in that regard, but I don't really have any interest in Henley based off of that either.
Good deal. Moving on the 7K range, a lot of names in here that have had some success here, and a lot of names that have had zero success here, which is surprising. Phil Mickelson, he's the host of this tournament. He's been, I guess he's been feast or famine for about any tournament of the last decade, but I would be him on full fade. Another guy we like to play on the West Coast, Kevin Strillman, full fade on him. Starting at the top of the 7,900s, I like a Chris Kirk. Any tournament where you got to shoot low 4 days. Not saying he's going to be right there in it, but he's going to be a good GPP in my opinion. Another couple of good GPPs I want to throw out in this range. Russell Knox, 7,800. There wouldn't hate to see maybe sprinkle a little Adam Long in there, who's a former champion 3 years ago. Michael Thompson's had some success, and your man, Jason Day. Has he ever played here?
Not in the last 5 years of what I'd run it. I didn't go deeper than that, but I'm going to assume no.
Yeah. Brennan Steele, 7,200. Sprinkle a little bit of him, Andrew Putnam, Johnny these guys. I don't hate Tom Hoagie either. These guys are going to be probably pretty low on. There's so many players here in the 7K range that the ownership's going to be spread out. Hit on a few that you like.
Yeah, I think you can mix and match in this $7,000 range. I don't mind a guy like Chris Kirk if you're going to go completely feast or famine with it. I think Cameron Champ, it's tough for me to say because he's coming in off of an injury. He's a terrible bunker player. We know that there's extensive bunkering here, but just a name, if he's going to be 1% owned like he is currently, it's just a name that I'm seeing. But my two favorite plays, and I'll try to limit it a little bit because I have a bad habit of mentioning like 20 golfers when we get into the 7,000s, but I like Gary Woodland at 7,700. I think his ownership's going to remain subdued because of his current form. There is winning upside for him at his price tag. He ranks 20th in this field when it comes to total driving. He's also inside the top 40 on easy courses under 7,200 yards. I think you have to be willing to be more aggressive than usual on some of these plays in GPPs. I want to pinpoint golfers that can actually win. And that's the other thing that's at least worth noting on it. Everybody's guaranteed 54 holes because the cut's going to take place on Saturday with it. So keep that in mind. It doesn't mean to go boom or bust with your strategy on it, but you can take guys like Gary Woodland, Siwoo Kim that might have a little bit higher miscut potential because their upside of winning is higher than a lot of the guys around them. And then the second choice, I know you will love, Andrew. It took me a second to realize why the turn wanted me on for this particular show so badly, but I finally put the pieces together. Jason Day's first start of 2022. If you can't have Day on the program to talk about the tournament, who better to turn to than me? So I know this song and dance with Day has been nothing more than that for the past few years, but I actually do really like him this week. A lot of times he gets picked for the humor aspect of it, even if he isn't in the event, but the stars are starting to align for him. He ranks 9th in my model. It's the first time he's been top 25 for probably 2 years. He's 6th in the field on easy courses that are short. Think Pebble Beach and all those locations where he's found past success. This is an ideal setup for him to potentially compete on the first page of the leaderboard. And then just going down to throw out a couple guys that are piquing my curiosity. Doug Yim, I think at 7,500, he's a very good iron player that if the putter can just heat up, he could find some success. Taylor Moore, I'm kind of in the mindset right now to fade a lot of the Korn Ferry guys. My model likes them more than they should because of the limited data, but Taylor Moore would be one of the ones I would consider. The other one would be Hayden Buckley. But I do like Taylor Moore a little bit more in this situation. And then Patton Kizzire, maybe you could figure out a way to go down there. He has not been good at this tournament, but he is so hit and miss with it. Brendan Steele, 7,200. That's about it for me, though. Like, there are names down here that are worth considering, but I do think it shrinks very quickly.
Yeah, I agree. And as we get on down here, you're probably going to get more of the same, but moving on. But 7K range, you named a few. Are you looking more towards? I mean, I feel like we get down here, you kind of got ball strikers and putters, not really great drivers down here. What are you thinking as you get lower in this salary?
When we get into the $6,000 range, like at the very, like from the 6,900 down to the very bottom, I kind of took a different approach where I did find some good drivers of the ball, or at least some long distance drivers of the ball. I think a guy like Dylan Fratelli is always worth a second look when he can open things up off the tee because of his distance. He's right now carrying less than 1% ownership. He's going to be your prototypical boom or bust target that gets a boost with an extra 18 holes being guaranteed. Hudson Swafford won the event in 2017. I thought his ball striking looked sharp at the Sony Open. We would have gotten a much better finish if the putter didn't fail. Sepp Strock at 6,700 gained 3.1 strokes with his irons last week. Tyler McCumber has made both of his cuts at this stop. He's top 15 in this field for distance. A guy like Chan Kim, I don't even like, that's as low as I would go and as wild as I would go with a play. But at 6,100, he gained 1.1 with his ball striking last week. The short game lost 3.9. It does seem to be a good spot to give him another chance at virtually no ownership. And then I guess the two other plays that I at least want to mention, Henrik Norlander, 6,900. Doesn't have the best course history since 2017, but he has made every cut, including a 12th last year. And then JT Poston, 6,400. 3 top 37s to go along with 2 missed cuts since 2017. Part of the reason for his success is the par 5 scoring. He ranks in the top 30 in this field when it comes to par 5 birdie or better percentage.
I like it. Yeah, we're gonna have the same as we did last week. A lot of players in their rookie season here is gonna be their first stop here. So there's gonna be a lot of guys that probably have some super talent that we don't even know about yet. especially with going in the AMEX, and maybe the 3 days will lighten up some of that load take some of that load off some of their shoulders, and we might see a couple of them break through right here. Very possible. I think you see a lot of first year guys that have a little bit of success out here. So I still like the Grayson Sig play. Still like Cameron Young down here. I want to stay away from like Wesley Bryan and Jason Duffner, who have had success here or had success in terms like this, but I just don't see it. Ryan Moore down here in 6,000. I like him in a tournament like this. However, he does a little bit better on harder golf courses, not easier golf courses. Same thing too, like a Stallings at 6,800. Whenever you get Stallings in the 6,000s, I think he's a pretty decent little GPP play. However, I think we might be a couple weeks early with him. We want to see golf courses with him that, the 175 to 225 proximity comes into play, and that's definitely not here. What about Nick Taylor, 6,700? Where do you got him on your model? If you can pull that up real quick.
Yeah, he's 56 for me overall, which is actually a good value when you're looking at a $6,700 golfer. So he's 24 spots lower than he should be on DraftKings and 47 spots lower on ownership. And he's looking at less than 1% right now. So I definitely think Nick Taylor's in play. 47th here in 2021, 40th in 2019, a 20th in 2018. He definitely seems to suit the course for what you would want here, and 21st overall at strokes gained total on short to easy courses. So I like the Nick Taylor call. And I guess the other person I would add is just a young player that maybe could find success here. Davis Riley at 6,800. He's somebody that my model continually seems to like. I'm curious to see where ownership goes with him though.
Okay, so that's going to lead us right into our final segment of the show. Spencer, where you at on your dart down here in the 6K range?
Give me yours first. Let me run this model really quickly. I can tell you who the best value is after you give me yours.
I mean, I like Nick Taylor possibly. I mean, if a guy gets the putter going at all, I mean, he's one of those guys that like you just look up and he's putting an eagle on every par five. He's hitting a ton of greens, and I can see him having success. So I'm gonna say Nick Taylor 6,700. Probably gonna get some pretty good value for a top 10 there. So that's my guy, Nick Taylor, down here at the 67 range.
Yeah, Nick Taylor is one of the 7 best values that I have down here too. As I said, don't have a problem with that. The best value on the board for me is JT Poston. I like the ownership. I like where he's at there. He is 37th. A guy like Cameron Young is grading out well, but I am a little bit afraid of the Corn Ferry guys. I'm going to be more so picking and choosing my spots, but I guess give me JT Poston as my dart throw this week.
JT Poston. Okay, if you're moving up here and you got to put your heart on the line, I'm gonna go a little bit off the sleeve a little bit, and I've already thrown his name out there. That's just because I think that if this guy does hit, I mean, you're going to be have a huge advantage on the rest of the DFS community. And Matthew Wolff. This is a perfect golf course. He gets hot with the driver and the putter. I mean, he can shoot 30 under in a golf tournament. So I like Matthew Wolff on this track, 9,300 for my hard play of the week.
I'm not going to shock you with mine here, but I legitimately believe this. I really like Jason Day this week. I hope that people don't end up playing him to the percentage of, like, if he can just stay from 7 to 10%, that's perfectly fine. But he's top 10 in my model. This is something that has not happened in the longest time. A lot of these are me forcing it, for whatever reason. Like, no matter how I ran the model, Jason Day continued to get better. And I didn't include Poa putting into the mix. That's something else that would have increased him. But 3rd on Pete Dye tracks, 6th at easy courses. We're going to need the irons to be better. We're going to need the par 5 scoring to be better with it. But if we can get an improvement from him in those 2 areas, he kind of checks all the boxes across the board. He's long enough off the tee. He's not the most accurate off the tee, but he's 25th overall for me in total driving. He's 4th out of GIR out of bunkers here. I think there's a lot of things to like about Jason Day this weekend. I think this is going to be the start of a little mini run for him. I think that he's going to be in play at Pebble Beach. I think there's going to be a couple tournaments here at Torrey Pines. Like, if the back can stay healthy, this is a really good potential for him.
Yeah, it definitely helps whenever you have to have reservations to go to Disneyland out there. So maybe he won't be able to skip out and do that. So yeah, Jason Day and JT Poston for Spencer. I've got Nick Taylor and Matt Wolf. But let's be honest. I mean, John Rahm's probably a guaranteed top 5. I mean, we can go with that. The turn is taking that stance anyway. Spencer, man, glad you fill in for Joe, and hope to see more of you here on the show. And what's your promo code get over at rotoballer.com?
Yeah, thank you, Andrew, for having me. It's always a pleasure doing this show with you guys. And my promo code over at Rotoballer is TEEOFF. That's going to get you access to the in-tournament model I have, all my in-tournament picks. As I mentioned, you get Joe's Core 4 article, all the amazing stuff that he writes. And just definitely be on the lookout for some of the news that we have coming. I do believe that there's one little piece of insight that's going to drop this week of a little move we're making at Rotoballer. So I'm super excited for it to be announced. And, thank you once again, Andrew, for having me on here.
No problem. No problem, Spencer. From the East Coast over here, the Andrew Putters, to the West Coast over at Spencer Aguiar. You have listened to the Turner Fantasy Golf Podcast.
Already hit 3 in the lake. It's gone.